Yielding. How I miss my magic minute. I want to say to the chairman of the Appropriations Committee how often he and I have said, you know, when we have these impasses, we need a clean CR. This CR is unclean. This CR will not get us to where you say you want to get, Mr. Chairman, and that's not shutting down the government. Because you know, and I know, the president will not sign this bill. Why? Because you put in poison pills that you know are unacceptable to him. Why? So you can get the votes on your side of the aisle to vote for your bill to keep the government open. Why is that difficult? Because so many of your folks, unless they get 100%, are prepared to shut down the government. You and I both know that, Mr. Chairman. I have great respect for you. Very frankly, I think you and I could go in a room and solve this in the next 30 seconds. But you and I are not in that room. It is time, as the Speaker has said, to be adults. Why is this a viable piece of legislation on the floor? Because you think you can hold the government ransom for an additional $12 billion. I said that I would not support, after supporting the first two, which I thought were reasonable to try to give us an opportunity to solve the differences that exist between us, that I would not vote for a third one, and I'm not going to vote for this one. It won't matter because it's dead anyway, and you all know it's dead. But you're banking on the fact that you know we don't want to shut down government. What's the proof in the pudding? We did not shut it down when we had disagreements with George Bush, because we believed that reasonable people elected by a diverse community in America who had different opinions were expected by our public to come together, reason together, and act productively together. Now, very frankly, I don't take a back seat to anybody on this floor in my support of defense, or the men and women in uniform, and Mr. Young knows that, my dear friend. Not a backseat to anyone. And yes, if we passed a unanimous consent request to fund at present levels, defense would continue. Should we have passed the defense bill last year? I think we should have. I'm sorry we didn't. I urge that we do it. But the Senate, as you might recall, would not allow any bills to come to the floor. Any bills. That is, the Republicans in the United States Senate would not allow that to happen. So now we are faced with not a let's reason together bill, but an additional $12 billion in cuts. Which means that week by week by week, you will think you will get to what you want. Not a compromise. Not an agreement, but what you want. And you'll do it $5 billion a week, $2 billion a week. This one is $12 billion a week. And you have no expectation that that will pass or be signed by the president. But you do it to pretend you want to keep government in operations. Newt Gingrich has said, don't worry about shutting down the government, as he shut it down in 1995 and over Christmas for 3 weeks in 95 and 96. Ladies and gentlemen, on my side of the aisle, we ought to reject this specious political act which pretends that we want to keep the government open. And we ought to do
time has
30
expired.
additional seconds. 30 additional seconds.
I yield 30 additional seconds.
We ought to do, Mr. Chairman, what you and I have done in the past as members of the Appropriations Committee. Say we haven't reached agreement. We'll do a clean CR at present levels while we continue to negotiate on behalf of the American people to do what we all want to do. We got to bring this deficit down. We can point fingers at one another as to
on that point, if we did that, we had a clean CR, the president would sign it into law.
Absolutely. And that would pass the Senate.
The gentleman's time has expired.
I urge my colleagues to reject this CR and adopt a clean CR that will keep the government in operations and allow us to come together and reason together.
The gentleman's time has
and
expired.
Pass a reasonable piece of legislation. I yield back the balance of my time.
CR as it relates to defense.
The chair needs to remind the members that remarks